What's up? We're back with the first round of the playoffs of the Little Cup World Cup, and it's between India and France. So let's get right into it. India will be on the left-hand side, and France will be on the right-hand side. And we're using a team built around Dragon Dance Tyrant. And if you notice, Tyrant actually has a pretty decent matchup. It can set up on, for example, Coughing. It can set up on Natu. If you really wanted to, you could Memento with Diglett and even set up on Mianfu. So Tyrant is looking definitely threatening, but you have to be careful about all these little annoying things. So for example, if the Diglett is Choice Scarf, it can beat the Tyrant. If the Natu has Thunder Wave, you can't set up on it. If the Coughing has Will-O-Wisp, you can't set up on it. So you have to be really careful. If the Mianfu has Taunt, you can't set up on it. So you have to be really careful about how you do it, but the main goal is going to be to try to sweep with Tyrant. And I will see in the game, we're going to see a typical Mianfu constant switching, final Gambit to remove the Mianfu. And then you're going to see Tyrant Dragon Dance on Coughing, and that is because Coughing has revealed Thief. And typically, you run Sludge Bomb, you run Fire Blast, and then you run Thunderbolt and Thief or Pain Split or Willow. But typically, if one of your coverage moves are Thief, you probably don't have Willow. So he sets up on the Tyrant, and in fact it doesn't have Willow, it tries to use Pain Split. He's going to Dragon Dance again, and Coughing cannot touch the Tyrant. So it's going for Sludge Bomb Poisons now. Tyrant is able to knock out the Coughing, but now the Diglett comes in, and the Diglett reveals it to be Focus Sash, which is an unexpected item, and the main sweeper Tyrant gets knocked out on the unexpected Focus Sash Diglett. Now, it looks like it's 3-3, but really it's much more difficult than that because Natu has coverage for everything. It can Heat Wave the Pharaoh, Psychic the Mianfu, Psychic the Coughing, and eventually you are going to lose to Natu, or at least take so much damage that Carvanha can sweep after. So France takes a 1-0 lead off the Focus Sash Diglett, a very unexpected set. Now we enter into game 2, which is black and white. We're using kind of a Hail team. It's not a Hail team as such, it's a regular team which has Hail for Sand. And guess what? They have a Sand team, so already the matchup is looking good. We're down 0-1, but the matchup does look good. And we're using a pretty interesting set. We're using Trick, Black Sludge, Ghastly. And the reason for doing that is because in black and white, knockoff is quite weak. It's not a very good move. It's a good move because it removes the item, but the base power is very low. So Trick Black Sludge acts as a form of knockoff. Not only do you remove the item, but you give it a Black Sludge to essentially be worse than having no item at all. And in exchange, you also receive an Eviolite as well. So it's a really good, interesting set in black and white to overcome the lack of knockoff. And you're going to see it pay off later, where Ghastly is going to be able to break down the Mianfu because of Burn, Sand, Black Sludge. It puts it in range of Sludge Bomb, and now Ghastly is going to KO the Mianfu. So the Black Sludge tech works out really well. Now it's going to be about breaking down the rest of the team. And the key thing is that Snover looks really good versus Sand. The only concern would be Poniard, especially Pursuit Poniard. That could be a big threat as well. So you really have to be careful how you play it. So you turn into Drillbur. Drillbur is going to put some more damage in. It's going to break through Hippo. Ghastly, you sack Ghastly here. Vullaby forces out Ghastly here. You Roost again. Mianfu comes in. Natu comes in. And you get a kill with Snover. And the reason Natu just died there was because there was no switch in anyway. What are you going to try? You're going to try maybe Poniard, right? So now Poniard comes in. And Pursuit does not KO. You can switch out without dying from Pursuit. But Snover gets sacrificed here for, I'm assuming, predicting the Pursuit, but it really wasn't worth it, because even if they did Pursuit, you're only doing 28 plus a freeze chance. So you lose your Snover, and all of a sudden what looked like a really good game, you had Hail versus Sand, you were able to remove the Mianfu. All of a sudden it becomes a lot more tricky, because you don't have anything that can outspeed Ghastly. Drillbur is at low health, Mianfu is at low health, Omanite is at full health, so it can check Ghastly, but that's very... I use that word very carefully because Omanite does take a lot of damage from Shadow Ball. And similarly, Vullaby can check Ghastly, but every turn it's going to be taking Hail damage, it's going to be taking Stealth Rock damage if it switches in. If Ghastly has Sludge Bomb, it's going to be taking Poison damage potentially. So it's a very tricky situation because now that the Snover is gone, you have nothing that can actually outspeed Ghastly. So you get a Toxic Spike up here on Further Leap, but that's not really valuable. You really wanted damage on something. You wanted damage on Poniard. Maybe you wanted Stealth Rock. But you trade a Toxic Spike for a Thunder Wave. Again, not really the most useful thing. And now it's really going to be struggle because Mianfu can beat the leap and Poniard, but if at any point you high jump kick into the Ghastly, you basically lose the game. So it's very tough to just say, oh, high jump kick to the leap. It's more practical to keep trying to U-turn on it. Now, it's going to turn into a Vullaby versus the leap showdown. Vullaby has Nasty Plot and Air Slash, but the leap has access to Toxic. So what's going to happen is an unfortunate Air Slash miss, and then the Toxic, and now Vullaby can't even break through the leap. It eventually switches out because the Vullaby, even if it could technically beat Leap, you wanted more health so you could deal with Ghastly later on. So now that switches out, and again, what do? Do you high jump kick into the Leap? It's such a risky play to make. He U-turns, if he high jump kick, Leap would be gone, but it's such a risky play. And what do? It's really struggling. Ghastly is going to keep cleaning up. You have the poison racking up, and Ghastly plus Poniard is going to be too much for Vullaby and Mianfu. And eventually, the Ghastly does stay alive to win the game. So France takes a 2-0 lead versus India, and we enter into Game 3. Now, Game 3 is Diamond and Pearl, Gen 4. Good lead. Gligar versus matchup is a good lead. You turn into the Duskull on the Dynamic Punch, which is good. And you Will-O-Wisp into the Houndour, which is very threatening potentially, but Gligar is incredibly bulky. It takes a Crunch instead of a Fire move, and Life Orb is revealed. But now Gligar is going to be able to get up Stealth Rock here, and Stealth Rock is really valuable. It's good for Houndour, it's good for Snover. You go into your own Snover here. Snover reveals Substitute, which is very interesting. You don't know what to expect now. It reveals Seed Bomb, which is not a very powerful move, and Snover reveals Hidden Power Fire. So now, this Snover beats that Snover because of Hidden Power Fire. So he goes to Machop predicting maybe a Hidden Power Fire, but he gets hit by a Blizzard. And now it's looking really good. A 6-5 lead, plus their Stealth Rock up. Houndour is going to knock out Snover, but that's just going to let Gligar come back in, and Gligar is very difficult to deal with. You're going to lose Houndour. You get a nice Sucker Punch, but Stealth Rock plus too much damage, and you're just really taking a lot of damage. Snover tries to Swords Dance versus Duskull, but Duskull is actually very bulky, and it's able to stop the Snover. Now, Diglett revenge kills, but Munchlax is still in the back. It's going to be able to revenge kill as well. And eventually, you can't really stop the Munchlax. It's just too bulky. And typically, you see Munchlax on 100% of teams because it's so good. But they don't have a Munchlax. And you can see how good it is. It beats Gligar, it beats Chinchou, now it's going to beat Diglett as well. And yeah, India comes back. Now they're only down 1-2. France has a 2-1 lead versus India. But this is a start. Now we enter into Game 4, which is Sword and Shield. And it's going to be a typical Mianfu game. But what's really going to be key here is the Grookey. The Grookey is completely walled by Fungus, typically. That's a normal Grookey. But this Grookey has Berry Juice, which means it is Acrobatics Berry Juice. So instead of being walled by Fungus, it can now use Acrobatics versus it and potentially one-hit KO. So you have to be really careful. Fungus gets knocked off, you have to be scared of the Acrobatics. So you go to Mianfu here, but Mianfu is KO'd by Acrobatics, and now it's really threatening. How do you deal with the Grookey? And on top of that, how do you deal with the Pharaoh Seed? Mianfu was your best way to deal with Pharaoh Seed. And your main source of attack is Porygon, which is walled by Pharaoh Seed. So how do you reconcile with that? How do you deal with the Pharaoh Seed when your main breaker doesn't actually break through Pharaoh Seed? Very tricky position. You have to deal with the Grookey and you have to deal with the Pharaoh Seed. How do you do it? Slowpoke switches into the Fungus, takes a Giga Drain, and then the Slowpoke reveals, it gets knocked off, and the Slowpoke reveals Flamethrower to lure Pharaoh Seed. So now all of a sudden, the game has completely shifted. Instead of Pharaoh Seed walling everything, now Porygon looks really threatening. Nothing can switch into Tri-Attack. It can potentially use Agility to outspeed everything. All you have is a Grookey with a Grassy Glide, a Mianfu with Fake Out maybe, but everything else is going to start dying to Agility plus Fake Out. So he goes to Mudbray here, but then he realizes that going Mudbray was a mistake, because if you went Mudbray, you would Earthquake, you knock out Slowpoke, okay, but then Porygon can come in Agility. So he makes a mistake, then realizes he made a mistake, and goes to Mianfu to sacrifice it, and now he goes to Grookey. So that was unnecessary to sack the Mianfu here. But now Grookey comes in, knocks out Slowpoke, And then it does such little damage to Porygon here. Porygon knocks out the Grookey here. Abra knocks out the Porygon. Diglett substitutes on the Abra switch out. And the reason the Abra switched out was because it didn't want to die to Diglett, obviously, right? Because you needed Abra for Fungus. Mudbray does not beat Fungus 1v1. So you substitute on the Mudbray, time it with Grassy Terrain running out. It is Scarf Mudbray, it outspeeds you. You're going to Earthquake for big damage, but you don't quite knock out the Mudbray. But you have Sucker Punch to knock out the Mudbray. So the clutch Sucker Punch reveal knocks out the Mudbray, and you are faster than Abra. Oh, and the Abra took Stealth Rock damage because it's common to run Inner Focus for Mianfu. But now India ties the game back at 2-2. We enter into Game 5, and Game 5 is really came down to a critical sequence here, where Timber beats the Vullaby here. You enter a 3-on-3 game, Timber versus Timber. There's a Staryu, there's a Vullaby at low health, versus a Timber, a Poniard, and a Diglett at low health. So from Makav's point of view, his Timber beats the Poniard and the Diglett with Mach Punch. So the only concern for him is how to beat the Timber. And similarly for Toto on France, he knows that if he loses Timber, it's game over, because he'll lose everything else to the opposing Timber. So how do you deal with it? Staryu does have Psychic, and it does have Hydro Pump. Vullaby is at low health, not likely to be useful for anything. So we see Mikav's Timber is faster, it knocks off the Timber, but Timber reveals Bulk Up, which is an uncommon set. So now the equation has slightly changed. Timber is knocked off here, but it does have a Bulk Up, and similarly Timber does not have a Bulk Up, but it is not knocked off. So who wins the battle? Timber versus Timber. Drain Punch, doing considerably more damage. You sacrifice the Vullaby here, that's a good idea. You don't want to lose your Timber because it beats everything. Now you go to Staryu here, and now you have a really important decision. Do you Psychic, predicting Timber to stay in, or do you Hydro Pump, predicting Timber to switch out? Now, both plays are equally good, because both players recognize that Timber is the most important point. If Timber loses, if Timber faints, then Mikav wins. Both players know that. So do you expect him to switch out, or do you expect him to predict you to switch out and predict him not predicting you, right? So what do you do? What predict do you make here? It's very tough to make a predict. And he goes to Ponder. Does he Hydro? No, he uses Psychic. So now that's the problem. You go to Timber on the knockoff, and again, you have another situation. Do you Mach Punch the Poniard? Because if you Mach Punch the Poniard, Poniard faints, and your Staryu can beat Timber and Diglett through Psychic and Ice Beam. So that's not really a concern. So what do? Do you Mach Punch predicting the Poniard to stay in, or do you Drain Punch predicting Poniard to stay out? Another tough predict to make. And again, he gets the predict wrong again, and Staryu is not going to be able to beat Timber, Poniard, and Diglett, and it does faint. So France takes a 3-2 lead versus India off the back of those two clutch predicts with the Poniard. Now we enter into game, it's 3-2, we enter into game 6. Now, this is actually a very good matchup for India because we can set up spikes with Pharaoh Seed and then Stealth Rock with Diglett, and Staryu, the Rapid Spinner, is spin blocked by Frillish. So spikes can get up very easily. Similarly, Calm Mind Natu is very tough to deal with because you don't really have anything that can beat the Calm Mind Natu. You have Staryu, which can typically do well versus non-Calm Mind Natu, but versus Calm Mind Natu, you're going to be doing very little damage to Natu. So it becomes really tricky and a very difficult matchup for France versus India here. And as you're going to see, the hazards are going to get up, and then Natu is simply going to win the game. It's very difficult, even beat up with such few Pokemon, it's very difficult to win. Calm Mind Natu, Staryu isn't going to be doing enough damage, and Calm Mind Natu plus all the hazards are simply going to win the game. So India ties it back 3-3 versus France, and we enter into Game 7, which is Orath Generation 6. Fletchling has Gale Wings if you do not know that. And what we're using right now is we're using a Timber with Drain Punch, Mach Punch, Ice Punch, and Bulk Up. Now Bulk Up Timber is itself very uncommon, but Bulk Up Ice Punch is even more uncommon. You typically see Bulk Up with Knockoff. So it's a very uncommon set we're using with Bulk Up and Ice Punch. And the reason we're using that set is because typically you want to knock off Fungus. our Cottony is going to be able to knock off Fungus anyway, because obviously you switch in Fungus to a Cottony, we're going to be able to bait it and knock off the Fungus. So you're going to see it happen now, where Dodo uses Pursuit and knocks out the Ghastly, and typically Dodos run Choice Scarf. So from Akonit's point of view, he thinks, nothing's wrong. He thinks, Timber, maybe it's bulk up. Even if it's bulk up, I have Fungus. He's not really concerned. But now, because you can set up on the Pursuit, you're going to be able to bulk up constantly, and you're able to Ice Punch the Fungus. And all you can hope for now is maybe Fletchling can crit, but you're at so many defense boosts. The Fletchling does not crit. You're able to Drain Punch here. Now you have to go to Dodo. But Dodo is going to get hit by Mac Punch. And all of a sudden, it's over. That one Pursuit play, when Dodo used Pursuit on the Ghastly, he didn't know anything was wrong. He thought, okay, I get a free kill on Ghastly. But then Timber ends up setting up, ends up winning, and India now lead 4-3 entering the final game. So where's the final game? That's actually my game, and I haven't played it yet. So if you want to see the game, on your screen, that video should be popped up, but the next video will be about the final game of the series, which is my game, which will be live. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next game, the final game of India versus France.